Deanna Vedder had $47 in her checking account when she made the decision that would mark her for death. She didn't know it then, standing in line at the Harbor District Café with her legs aching from a double shift and her phone lighting up with her brother's tuition reminder. She didn't know that the tattooed stranger in front of her, the one whose black card kept declining while the barista's hand trembled, was the kind of man who never forgot a favor, the kind who repaid kindness like a blood oath, the kind who, 2 hours later, would return with a motorcade that would shut down 3 city blocks. He came back 2 hours after she paid for his meal, with 20 armed guards, with luxury vehicles worth more than her entire life, with car keys she couldn't even dream of touching. "I can't accept this. You already saved my life. The debt is mine." Bacco Pirozzi, Italian Mafia boss who controls the West Coast. And Deanna just became the target every rival needed to destroy. Welcome back to Shadowed Romance Stories. If you love stories where one moment of kindness collides with a world of deadly power, hit that subscribe button. We're building something special here, and trust me, you don't want to miss what Bacco Pirozzi does next when his enemies come for the woman who showed him mercy. Deanna Vedder had perfected the art of being invisible. It wasn't something she'd learned overnight. It had taken 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days since her mother's funeral. Since the hospital bills arrived like vultures, since her younger siblings Marcus and Talia became her responsibility, since her own life became something she observed from a distance rather than actually lived. She clocked out of her first shift at Harbor Grounds at 2:47 p.m., her lower back screaming from 6 hours of standing. The manager didn't look up when she left. Good. Being noticed meant being asked to stay longer, to cover someone's shift, to do more than she was already doing. Deanna had learned to move through spaces like smoke, present but not substantial, there but not really seen. The bus ride to her second job took 43 minutes. She used the time to transfer money on her phone. $180 to Marcus for his community college textbooks. $220 to Talia for the science camp deposit she'd been begging about for weeks. That left $47.12 in her checking account until Friday's direct deposit, which would immediately be carved up by the minimum payment on the $34,000 in medical debt that hung around her neck like an anchor. Her mother had fought breast cancer for 11 months. The insurance had fought back harder. Deanna pressed her forehead against the cool bus window and closed her eyes. She didn't cry anymore. Crying required energy she couldn't afford to spend. By 3:35 p.m., she was standing behind the register at Preston Pour, a boutique juice bar in the business district where people paid $16 for drinks that cost $2 to make. She smiled her invisible smile, polite but not memorable, warm but not inviting. The kind of smile that said I'm here to serve you without saying I exist beyond this counter. Her coworker Jenny had tried to befriend her once. Asked about her life, her hobbies, whether she wanted to grab drinks after work. Deanna had answered in careful half-truths and gentle deflections until Jenny stopped asking. It was easier that way. Friendships required time, energy, emotional bandwidth. Deanna was operating on fumes. She'd become an expert at rationing herself, at moving through her days in a state of controlled shutdown, powering only the essential systems. Wake up. Work. Send money. Sleep 4 hours. Repeat. She'd learned to ignore her body's protests, the constant headache, the way her hands trembled when she was too tired, the hollow feeling in her chest that had nothing to do with hunger. Being invisible meant no one noticed when she ate the same $3 convenience store sandwich for lunch every day. No one asked why she wore the same rotation of 4 outfits. No one wondered why she never talked about plans or dreams or anything beyond the next shift. She preferred it that way. Visibility was dangerous. Visibility meant people could see how close to the edge she was living, how one unexpected expense would send her over. Visibility meant vulnerability, and Deanna couldn't afford to be vulnerable. Not when Marcus was counting on her to help him become the first in their family to finish college. Not when Talia was still having nightmares about their mother, and needed therapy Deanna couldn't pay for. So she stayed invisible. She moved through the world like a ghost, leaving no impression, making no waves. She kept her head down and her needs smaller than anyone else's. She perfected the smile that deflected questions and the posture that discouraged conversation. At 9 p.m., when her shift ended and her feet were numb and her exhaustion was so complete it felt like drowning, Deanna walked 3 blocks to the cheaper café where she allowed herself one small luxury before the bus ride home: a $4 coffee and 20 minutes of sitting down. It was the only time all day she let herself stop moving. She didn't know that tonight, in that café, her invisible life was about to shatter completely. The café was nearly empty at 9:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, which was exactly why Deanna chose it. Fewer people meant less noise, less energy required to maintain her careful invisibility. She stood in line with her phone in her hand, mentally calculating. $4.12 for the coffee. That left $42 for the rest of the week. Bus fare was $2.50 each way, for trips before Friday. That was $20. The remaining $22 would cover 2 more convenience store meals if she was careful. The man in front of her was wrong for this place. Deanna noticed it immediately, the way someone notices a crack in a windshield. He was too still, too composed. His charcoal suit too expensive for a neighborhood cafe at this hour. Dark hair swept back from a sharp face, and tattoos, intricate, deliberate designs, crawled up his neck and disappeared beneath his collar. He held himself like someone who'd never questioned whether he belonged anywhere. The barista's hand shook slightly as she rang up his order. "That'll be $8.47. He handed her a black card without looking at the screen. The kind of card Deanna had only seen in movies. The machine beeped. "Declined." "Try it again," he said. His voice was low, accented, Italian, maybe, and carried the weight of someone who didn't make requests so much as state facts. The barista swiped again. Her fingers fumbled. Another decline. A muscle ticked in the man's jaw, the only sign of reaction. He pulled out a second card, then a third. Each one declined. Behind Deanna, someone sighed impatiently. Someone else checked their watch with pointed irritation. The man didn't apologize. Didn't explain. He simply stood there, utterly motionless, as the barista's face flushed red and the line behind them grew restless. But Deanna saw something else. The way his fingers pressed white against the counter. The subtle tension in his shoulders. This wasn't embarrassment. This was danger, coiled tight and barely contained. The barista opened her mouth, probably to ask him to step aside, and Deanna didn't think. She just moved. "I'll cover it." The words came out before she could stop them, before her exhausted brain could remind her that she had $47 to last 4 days, that she couldn't afford her own problems let alone a stranger's. But she'd already stepped forward, already pulled out her debit card with the chip that barely worked half the time. The man turned to look at her. His eyes were dark, nearly black, and utterly unblinking. They fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch, made her feel suddenly, terrifyingly visible for the first time in years. He didn't speak, didn't move, just looked at her like he was committing every detail to memory, like he was reading something in her face she didn't know was written there. "You don't need to do that," he said finally. Each word measured, deliberate. "It's already done." Deanna handed her card to the barista, not breaking eye contact. She didn't know why. Maybe because looking away felt like losing something. Maybe because his gaze demanded it. The transaction went through. $8.47 disappeared from her account. That left $38.65. The man accepted the coffee the barista slid across the counter, still watching Deanna. The moment stretched between them, heavy and strange and binding. She had the sudden irrational feeling that she'd just signed something without reading the terms. That this wasn't a simple good deed but an agreement, a contract written in some language she didn't speak. "Thank you," he said, and it sounded nothing like gratitude. It sounded like a promise. Like a threat. Then he walked out, and the temperature in the cafe seemed to rise 10 degrees. Deanna ordered her coffee with shaking hands she didn't understand. She told herself it was exhaustion. Low blood sugar. The stress of too many shifts and too little sleep. She didn't know she'd just saved the life of the most dangerous man on the West Coast. She didn't know he'd already decided exactly how he'd repay her. Deanna felt it before she saw it. At 11:23 p.m., she was wiping down the juice bar counter for the third time, preparing to close, when the floor began to vibrate. Subtle at first, just a tremor through her sneakers, then stronger. Like thunder rolling in, but the sky had been clear all evening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she watched 3 black SUVs pull up to the curb. Then 3 more. Then 4 sleek sedans that looked like they cost more than her mother's entire medical debt. They arranged themselves in a precise formation that blocked off the entire street, and Deanna's hands went still on the counter, the cleaning rag forgotten. Car doors opened in synchronization. Men emerged, 20 of them, maybe more, all wearing identical black suits and earpieces. They moved with military precision, forming a corridor from the largest SUV directly to the juice bar entrance. Several of them were openly carrying firearms. What the hell? Jenny breathed beside her. The back door of the center SUV opened. He stepped out like he owned the ground beneath his feet, and maybe he did. The tattooed stranger from the café, but now Deanna could see what the dim lighting had hidden before. The deadly grace in his movements, the way every man in that convoy oriented toward him like a compass finding north, the absolute certainty in his posture that the world would bend to accommodate him. He walked through the corridor of guards and pushed open the juice bar door. The bell chimed, absurdly cheerful. "You," Deanna whispered, and it came out like an accusation. "Me." He stopped 3 feet from the counter, near enough that she could see the intricate details of the tattoos on his neck. A serpent, a saint, words in Italian she couldn't read. He held up a key fob. A luxury car key, gleaming and foreign in his tattooed hand. "For you." "What?" "The debt has been repaid." He set the key fob on the counter between them with the careful precision of someone laying down a weapon. "The car is parked outside. The title is in your name. Consider us even." Deanna stared at the keys like they might explode. Through the window, she could now see it. A vehicle that looked like it belonged in a magazine, all sharp lines and predatory elegance. The kind of car that turned heads. The kind that screamed, "Look at me." Everything she'd spent 2 years trying not to be. "I can't," her voice cracked. She pushed the keys back across the counter, nearly knocking them to the floor in her haste. "I can't take this. I don't want it. I don't want any of this. You already saved my life." His expression didn't change. "The debt is mine. It was $8. The words burst out of her, too loud in the empty space. It was a coffee, not a car, not 20 armed men, not whatever this is. She gestured wildly at the convoy outside, at the guards, at him. "I don't know you. I don't want to know you. Please just leave me alone." Something flickered across his face. Not offense. Something colder, more calculating. He studied her the way he had in the café, like he was solving an equation only he could see. "You really mean that?" he said finally, and it sounded like a discovery. "Yes." Deanna's hands were shaking now, exhaustion and confusion and something close to panic making her vision blur. "Yes, I mean it. Take your car, take your guards, and forget this happened. Forget me." He reached out slowly, giving her time to back away, which she didn't, and picked up the key fob. Slipped it back into his pocket. The motion was smooth, unbothered, like this had been a minor negotiation rather than her frantically refusing a gift worth more than her yearly salary. "You'll change your mind," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out. The convoy pulled away in the same synchronized formation, and within 90 seconds, the street was empty. Like it had never happened. Like Deanna had imagined the whole thing. But Jenny was gripping her arm hard enough to bruise, and someone across the street was filming on their phone, And Deanna knew with absolute bone-deep certainty that her invisible life had just ended. By 6:47 a.m., Deanna's face was everywhere. She woke to 73 text messages, 14 missed calls, and a video that had been viewed 2.3 million times. The caption read, "Mafia boss tries to give random woman a Bentley, she says no." The footage was shaky but clear enough. Her own face, exhausted and panicked under the fluorescent lights. The convoy of black vehicles. The tattooed stranger holding out car keys like an offering. Her refusal, played over and over in countless loops across every platform. "Oh God," Deanna whispered to her empty studio apartment. "Oh God, oh God." The comments were worse than the video itself. Thousands of strangers dissecting her life, her choices, her sanity. Who turns down a Bentley? She's either the smartest woman alive or the dumbest. Anyone know who she is? Drop the at. And beneath it all, like a dark current, that's Bacco Pirozzi. If he's interested in her, she's either very lucky or very dead. Deanna's phone rang. Jenny's name flashed on the screen. "Tell me you've seen it," Jenny said without preamble. "Tell me you know what you did." "It was I just paid for his coffee, I didn't." "Deanna." Jenny's voice dropped to something between awe and terror. "That wasn't just some guy. That was Bacco Pirozzi. The Bacco Pirozzi. He runs the entire West Coast operation. Drugs, weapons, gambling, protection. If it's illegal and profitable from here to Seattle, he controls it. The feds have been trying to touch him for a decade. The man is untouchable." The words landed like physical blows. Deanna sat down hard on her mattress, which was just a box spring on the floor because she'd sold the frame 6 months ago. "And you paid for his coffee," Jenny continued, almost hysterical now. "You rejected his gift in front of his entire crew. Girl, you're either about to be very rich or very dead, and I genuinely cannot tell which." Deanna ended the call with shaking hands. Across the city, in a penthouse that occupied the entire 47th floor of a building he owned, Bacco Pirozzi was reading the same report for the third time. "Nothing?" he asked. His second-in-command, Luca, spread his hands apologetically. "Nothing, boss." Deanna Marie Vedder, 26. Works 2 minimum-wage jobs, barely keeps her head above water. Sends most of her money to her younger siblings. College tuition for the brother, therapy and summer programs for the sister. Mother died of cancer 2 years ago, left her with $34,000 in medical debt. She's been paying it down in $50 increments. Pirozzi's jaw tightened. Priors? Connections? Anyone paying her, anyone she owes. Clean as fresh snow. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. No boyfriend, no gambling problem, no addiction. She doesn't go out, doesn't date, barely has friends. The woman works, sends money home, and sleeps. That's her entire life. Luca paused. The psychological profile suggests severe burnout and possible depression. "She's running on empty. And she covered my coffee." "And she covered your coffee," Luca confirmed. "With money she needed." According to her bank records, that $8.47 was part of her food budget for the week. "She literally gave you money she needed to eat." Pirozzi stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His city. The one he'd built through blood and calculation, where every player knew their position and every debt was meticulously tracked. He'd spent 20 years learning to read people, to see their angles, to anticipate their moves. Deanna Vedder had no angle. No move. No motive beyond basic human kindness that she couldn't afford. "She's the most dangerous person I've ever met," he said quietly. Luca frowned. "Boss. I can't control kindness, Luca. Can't predict it, can't buy it, can't threaten it into existence. She didn't help me because she wanted something. She helped me because she saw someone who needed help." He turned from the window, his expression hardening. And now she's all over the internet, tied to my name, with my enemies already watching. What do you want to do? Pirozzi's answer was immediate. Protect her. 24-hour surveillance. I want eyes on her every second. If anyone even looks at her wrong, I want to know about it. She won't like that. She rejected a Bentley. I'm aware she won't like it. A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched his face. But she saved my life, Luca. Whether she knows it or not, whether she wants it or not, she's mine to protect now. That's how debts work. Deanna felt the eyes on her for 3 days before she actually saw him. It started as a prickling sensation between her shoulder blades during her morning bus ride. A black sedan that appeared behind her on 2 separate walks home. The same broad-shouldered man in a gray jacket browsing the convenience store while she bought her lunch, then again outside harbor grounds during her afternoon shift. Not Pirozzi's men. She'd learned to recognize those. They were too polished, too professional, too careful to maintain exact distances. This was different. Sloppy. Obvious. Almost like he wanted her to notice. On Thursday evening, walking from the bus stop to her apartment, she finally turned around and confronted the empty street behind her. I know you're there. A figure stepped from the alcove of a closed shop. Even in the dim streetlight, recognition hit her like ice water. Brent Lorne. Her former manager from the retail job she'd quit 8 months ago after he'd cornered her in the stockroom one too many times. His hands wandering, his breath hot with entitlement. Deanna. He smiled, and it was all wrong. Been a while. Stay away from me. She pulled her phone from her pocket, fingers finding the emergency dial. Just want to talk. Saw you on the news with your new boyfriend. He took a step closer. Bet you think you're special now, huh? Bet you think. He didn't finish. A hand clamped onto his shoulder from behind and slammed him face first into the brick wall with enough force that Deanna heard something crack. 2 of Pirozzi's men materialized from nowhere, moving with lethal efficiency. One secured Lorne's arms behind his back. The other spoke quietly into his radio. We have him, boss. The stalker. Deanna's legs went weak. How did you? We've been watching, the first guard said, not unkindly. Making sure you're safe. 30 minutes later, in a warehouse that smelled of rust and motor oil, Bacco Pirozzi looked at Brent Lorne the way someone might examine an insect under glass. Lorne was zip-tied to a metal chair, blood dripping from his broken nose. He'd been crying. Pirozzi found that pathetic. Her name, Pirozzi said quietly, is Deanna Vedder. You will address her with respect when you explain why you've been following her. I wasn't. Pirozzi moved faster than Lorne could process. One moment he was standing 3 feet away. The next, his hand was wrapped around Lorne's throat, thumb pressing into the windpipe with surgical precision. Not enough to crush. Just enough to make breathing a conscious effort. I watched my mother get beaten by my father for 12 years, Pirozzi said, his voice almost conversational. Every night, she'd make excuses for him. Every morning, she'd cover the bruises. I was 14 when I finally put a knife in his throat. He leaned closer, his eyes flat and merciless. I swore that day I would never let another man put his hands on a woman who didn't want them there. So you will tell me exactly why you've been stalking Deanna, or I will make your death last for days. He released Lorne's throat. The man gasped, coughing. I was paid. The words tumbled out in a panic. I was paid to follow her, to scare her, to make her feel unsafe. Pirozzi's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop. By whom? I don't know his name. Some guy, Italian accent like yours, gave me $5,000 cash. Said to make her life difficult. Said she needed to understand she wasn't safe. Lorne was sobbing now. That's all I know, I swear, that's everything. Luca stepped forward from the shadows, his phone already out. He showed Pirozzi a photo. Was this the man? Lorne nodded frantically. Yes. That's him. Pirozzi looked at the screen and felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest. Dario Moretti. His oldest rival. His most persistent enemy. The man who'd been trying to find a weakness in Pirozzi's armor for 5 years. And now he had one. Exhausted, kind woman who'd paid for a coffee and accidentally made herself the target of a war. Luca, Pirozzi said calmly, make sure Mr. Lorne understands that if he comes within a mile of Deanna again, we'll have another conversation. A much shorter one. He was already walking toward his car, already planning his next move. Dario thought Deanna was a weakness he could exploit. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Deanna found the guard outside her apartment building at 11:34 p.m. He was leaning against a black SUV, arms crossed, watching her approach with the patient stillness of someone paid to wait. She recognized him from the convoy, one of the 20 men in identical suits who'd formed that precise corridor. Ms. Vedder, he said, straightening. Mr. Pirozzi has asked me to ensure your building is secure tonight. I don't want, she started, but exhaustion made the protest die in her throat. She was too tired to fight. Too tired to be afraid. Fine. Whatever. Just stay out here. She climbed the 3 flights to her studio, locked the door, and collapsed onto her mattress still wearing her work clothes. Sleep came fast and dreamless. She woke to knocking at 2:17 a.m. For a moment, still caught in the fog of too little sleep, she thought it was a dream. Then the knocking came again. 3 measured taps that somehow conveyed both patience and absolute certainty that the door would be opened. Deanna looked through the peephole. Bacco Pirozzi stood in her hallway, alone, still wearing the dark suit from earlier but with his tie loosened and his collar unbuttoned. The tattoos on his neck seemed darker in the dim hallway light. Behind him, she could see his guards standing at the top of the stairs, keeping watch. She shouldn't open the door. Every instinct screamed at her not to. But something about the way he stood there, not threatening, not demanding, just waiting, made her turn the lock. It's 2 a.m, she said. I know. I'm sorry. He didn't try to enter. But you need to know the truth. All of it. And it couldn't wait. Despite herself, despite everything, Deanna stepped aside. He entered her tiny studio, this man who probably owned buildings bigger than her entire apartment complex, and looked around with no judgment in his expression. Just careful observation. The café, he said, turning to face her. That night, when my cards declined. Do you know why? You forgot to pay your bill? Even as she said it, she knew how ridiculous it sounded. Someone hacked my accounts. Froze everything remotely accessible. His voice was steady, factual. 3 men were positioned in that cafe with orders to kill me the moment I stepped outside. They were waiting for me to leave, to be distracted and frustrated and alone on that street. Deanna's breath caught. But you paid for my coffee. You delayed me by 2 minutes while the transaction processed, while we stood there. While you looked at me like I was just a person who needed help. Something flickered across his face. My security team arrived during those 2 minutes. They swept the perimeter, identified the threat, neutralized it before I ever left the building. If I'd walked out when I was supposed to, I'd be dead. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. That's what made it real. He took a step closer, and Deanna found she couldn't move. The man who planned that hit is named Dario Moretti. He's my oldest enemy. He's been trying to find leverage against me for years, and now he thinks he has it. Me, Deanna whispered. You. Pirozzi's jaw tightened. He had your ex-manager follow you. He's watching you, studying you, trying to determine how important you are to me. And because of that video, because the entire city saw me try to give you a car, he thinks you're my weakness. But I'm not. I'm nobody to you. You saved my life. He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. In my world, that creates a debt that can never be fully repaid. And Dario knows that. He'll use you to hurt me, Deanna. He'll take you, torture you, kill you, just to prove he can. The room felt too small suddenly. Too close. What are you saying? I'm saying you're under my protection now. Non-negotiable. His voice dropped, became something harder, something absolute. I have guards on your building, on your routes to work, on every place you go. You've become collateral in a war you didn't ask to join, and I'm sorry for that. But I won't let him touch you. I don't want this. Her voice broke. I just wanted to help someone. I know. And for just a moment, something almost gentle crossed his face. But kindness has consequences, Deanna. And I'm one of them. Deanna smelled the gasoline before she opened her apartment door. She'd left for her morning shift at 5:47 a.m. By 2:15 p.m., when she returned between jobs, the lock was broken and hanging loose. Her hands shook as she pushed the door open. Everything she owned had been destroyed. Her mattress was slashed open, fillings spilling out like guts. Her clothes were torn and scattered, soaked in something that reeked of chemicals. The few photos she had of her mother, the only ones she'd managed to save, were ripped into pieces and arranged on the floor in a deliberate pattern. Words were spray-painted across the wall in dripping red letters. You're next. Deanna stood in the doorway and felt something inside her simply break. She called the police. They took a report with barely concealed boredom, told her it was probably random vandalism, and left within 20 minutes. She called her landlord. He told her she was responsible for the damage, that her security deposit wouldn't cover it, that maybe she should find somewhere else to live. She sat on the ruined mattress and tried to breathe. Her phone buzzed. A notification from her bank. She opened it with numb fingers. Account balance. $0. Someone had drained everything. Every dollar she'd scraped together, every payment she'd been planning to send to Marcus and Talia, gone. Just gone. She called Harbor Grounds. Her manager answered on the third ring. Deanna, don't bother coming in tomorrow, he said before she could speak. Or ever. You're terminated effective immediately. What? Why? Corporate decision. Something about liability concerns and unwanted attention. Look, I don't make the rules. Your final check will be mailed. He hung up. She called Prest and Poor next. Same story. Terminated. Liability. Don't come back. Deanna sat in the ruins of her life and felt the world tilt sideways. No apartment. No jobs. No money. No way to help Marcus or Talia. No way to pay the medical debt. No way to survive. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She just sat there, holding her phone, trying to remember how to breathe. She didn't hear Pirozzi arrive. Didn't hear him dismiss his guards or climb the 3 flights of stairs. The first she knew of his presence was his voice, sharp and deadly from the doorway. Who did this? She looked up. He stood there in his perfect suit, surveying the destruction with an expression that would have terrified her if she'd had any fear left to feel. Dario? He asked, already knowing. She nodded. Found her voice. He took everything. My jobs. My money. Everything. Pirozzi pulled out his phone and made a call. Luca. I need a full cleaning crew at this address in 30 minutes. And have the penthouse guest room prepared. She's moving in tonight. He ended the call and turned to her. Pack whatever isn't destroyed. I'm not. Yes, you are. He crossed the room, knelt in front of her so they were eye level. This is what escalation looks like. Deanna. Tomorrow it won't be your things he destroys. It'll be you. So you can come with me willingly, or I can carry you out. But either way, you're leaving this place right now. She should have fought. Should have protested. But she was so tired, and he was offering safety when everything else had been ripped away. Okay, she whispered. She had one bag, an old duffel with a broken zipper. Pirozzi took it from her hands, pulled a small sewing kit from his car, and spent 5 minutes fixing the zipper with surprising dexterity. His tattooed fingers moved with precise, practiced care. "My mother taught me," he said, answering her unspoken question. "Before my father killed her gentleness." The penthouse was everything her life wasn't: space, light, safety. But what broke through her numbness was what she found 3 days later, when Pirozzi's driver took her to the cemetery she hadn't been able to visit in months. Her mother's grave was clean. The weeds were gone. And there, in a simple vase, were fresh sunflowers, her mother's favorite. "He goes every week," the driver said quietly. "Been doing it since he found out you couldn't afford to." Deanna touched the petals and finally cried. Deanna had been living in the penthouse for 6 days when she decided to take a walk. She told herself it was safe. Pirozzi's guards were always close, the sun was still up, and she just needed 20 minutes of normalcy. 20 minutes to feel like a person instead of a prisoner in a gilded cage. She made it 3 blocks before the van pulled up beside her. 2 men moved with brutal efficiency. A hand clamped over her mouth, something chemical-soaked pressed against her face. The smell, sweet and wrong, filled her lungs. She tried to scream, tried to fight, but her limbs went heavy and the world tilted. The last thing she saw was the guard who'd been following her, crumpling to the ground with blood spreading from his head. Then nothing. Pirozzi was in a meeting with his accountants when the fear hit him. It wasn't rational. Wasn't based on any information. Just a sudden visceral certainty that something was catastrophically wrong. He stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. "Boss!" Luca looked up, alarmed. Pirozzi's phone rang. The guard assigned to Deanna. He answered already knowing what he'd hear. "She's gone." The guard's voice was tight with pain. "They took her." 3 men, unmarked van. "I'm hit but mobile. I got a partial plate. Find her." Pirozzi's voice was dead calm, which was always more dangerous than anger. "Lock down the city. Every port, every bridge, every highway. I want every safe house Dario has ever used surrounded. I want eyes on every warehouse, every abandoned building, every place he might take her. Shut it all down. Now." He ended the call and looked at Luca. "Get everyone. I don't care who's off duty, who's sleeping, who's in the middle of a job. Everyone reports in the next 10 minutes or they're out of the organization permanently." "Boss, if we mobilize that hard, the feds will." "I don't care." Pirozzi's eyes were black and merciless. "She saved my life, Luca. She's innocent in all of this, and he took her because of me. So I will burn this entire city down to find her. Do you understand?" Luca nodded and started making calls. Deanna woke to cold concrete and zip ties cutting into her wrists. The warehouse was massive, empty except for the chair she was bound to and the man watching her from 10 feet away. Even through her blurred vision, she recognized him from the photos Pirozzi had shown her. Dario Moretti. Impeccably dressed, casually holding a gun. "Finally awake," he said pleasantly. "Good. I was getting bored. He'll kill you for this." Her voice came out hoarse. "Perhaps. But first, he'll watch you die. That's how you destroy a man like Bacco Pirozzi. You take away the thing he thinks he can protect." Dario smiled. He's built his entire identity on keeping people safe, on repaying debts, on honor. So I'm going to show him exactly how powerless he really is. The warehouse door exploded inward. Pirozzi came through like a force of nature, 20 armed men behind him, but he was faster, deadlier, more focused than any of them. Dario's guards tried to form a defensive line. 3 of them went down in seconds, neutralized with brutal efficiency. Pirozzi crossed the warehouse floor with singular purpose. Dario raised his gun. Pirozzi batted it aside like it was a toy and slammed him against a support beam with enough force to crack ribs. "You made a mistake," Pirozzi said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You thought she was my weakness. But she's the reason I'm still alive. The reason I have a debt to repay. And I will spend the rest of my life paying her back. He slammed Dario's head against the beam once, twice. On the third impact, Dario went limp. Then Pirozzi was moving toward her, pulling a knife from his belt. Deanna flinched instinctively, but his hands were gentle as he cut through the zip ties. Her wrists were raw and bleeding. He cursed softly in Italian and gathered her into his arms like she weighed nothing. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe now. I've got you." Deanna's hands clutched at his suit jacket, and she realized she was shaking. "I thought. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He carried her toward the exit, his men forming a protective corridor. "But I promise you, Deanna, on my life, on everything I have, no one will ever touch you again." She believed him. Deanna woke to unfamiliar softness. The sheets beneath her were expensive, the kind that felt like water against skin. The room was dim, heavy blackout curtains blocking whatever time of day it was. For a moment, still caught between sleep and consciousness, she forgot where she was. Forgot the warehouse, the zip ties, the chemical taste still lingering at the back of her throat. Then she tried to move, and pain lanced through her wrists. Memory crashed back. The van. Dario's smile. The cold certainty that she was going to die in that warehouse. And Pirozzi, carrying her out like she was something precious. She turned her head slowly, carefully, and found him. He was sitting in the chair beside her bed. His body angled toward her even in sleep like some part of him was still standing guard. His suit was rumpled and stained, rust-colored patches on the sleeves that she knew weren't rust at all. His tie was gone, collar unbuttoned, and his face. Deanna had never seen him like this. Unguarded. Exhausted. The harsh lines softened by sleep into something almost vulnerable. The tattoos that usually made him look dangerous now just looked like art on skin. Like stories written in ink. His jaw was dark with stubble, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of days without proper rest. He'd stayed. While she slept, for how long? Hours? Days? He'd stayed right here in this chair watching over her. "Bacco," she whispered. His eyes snapped open immediately, going from sleep to complete alertness in a heartbeat. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by sharp focus as he leaned forward, his gaze sweeping over her face. "You're awake." His voice was rough, raw. "How do you feel? Are you in pain? Do you need—" "I'm okay." She wasn't, really. Her wrists throbbed, her head ached, and her whole body felt like it had been wrung out. But compared to what could have happened, "I'm alive. Because of you." Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe. Or something deeper. "You should never have been in danger in the first place. That's on me. All of it. You didn't kidnap me. I made you a target." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and carefully took her bandaged wrist in his hand. His touch was impossibly gentle. "The moment I walked into that juice bar with my convoy, the moment that video went viral, I painted a bullseye on your back. Dario used you to get to me, and you almost died for it. But I didn't." She turned her hand over so their palms touched. His hands were scarred, she noticed. Old marks that spoke of violence she couldn't imagine. "You found me. You saved me. I'll always find you." He said it like a vow. Like something binding and absolute. "I meant what I said in that warehouse, Deanna. I will spend the rest of my life paying you back for what you did for me. Not because I have to. Because I want to. Because you showed me something I'd forgotten existed." "What's that?" "Kindness without agenda. Compassion without cost." His thumb traced the edge of her bandage, featherlight. "You gave me something when you had nothing to give. You saw me as human when I'd spent 20 years building walls to make sure no one could. And that—" his voice dropped. "That means more than you could possibly understand." Deanna felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, since her mother's funeral, since she'd taken on the weight of the world alone, she didn't feel alone. This man was dangerous, terrifying, powerful in ways that should have sent her running. But sitting here in his penthouse, her hand in his, watching him look at her like she was the most important thing in his world, she felt safer than she'd felt in years. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now you rest. You heal." His jaw tightened. "And I make absolutely certain that no one ever threatens you again. Dario is finished. His organization is dismantled. Anyone who even thinks about coming after you will answer to me. And us." The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them had named yet. Pirozzi's answer was simple, direct, honest in a way that made her breath catch. "I'm here," he said. "For as long as you'll let me be. I'm here." And somehow those 2 words meant everything. Sometimes kindness doesn't stay simple. Sometimes it grows into something bigger, more complicated, more beautiful than you ever imagined. Deanna learned that a single act of compassion could change everything. Not just for the person you help, but for yourself too. She'd spent years making herself invisible, believing she had to carry every burden alone. But the moment she reached out to help someone else, even when she had nothing to spare, she found something she didn't know she needed. Someone who would fight for her the way she'd fought for everyone else. If you're carrying the world on your shoulders right now, if you're exhausted and invisible and wondering when it's your turn to be taken care of, this story is for you. You deserve to be protected. You deserve to be seen. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness opens the door to the life you've been too tired to dream about. Thank you so much for being here with us at Shadowed Romance Stories. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Until next time, beautiful souls, keep your heart open. You never know whose life you might save, or who might save yours.